Good morning, everybody. It's always difficult following a politician because they're such accomplished performers, and Lord Mayor Quirk's no different. He spoke beautifully about Brisbane, and one of the things about Brisbane is it's Australia's largest city council, and the Gold Coast City Council is Australia's second largest. And one of the interesting things about that is you can observe the things which are happening and have happened in Brisbane, and know that the younger sibling, and we are a younger sibling of Brisbane, and have the occasional sibling rivalry, which you might expect. But as younger siblings do, we also learn from the older ones and follow, and in some cases emulate those things. So if as many investors want to know the future, and in this case the future of the Gold Coast, you can in many occasions just observe what has happened in Brisbane and know that we are learning from that and implementing those things here on the Gold Coast as well. So as I roll through this presentation, you'll probably hear some echoes of some of the things that I say in what the Lord Mayor has already said. I'm from Western Australia, actually, so hello to West Australians. Lovely place. I'm going back to Shark Bay in a week's time to see my family. What's interesting is why I've washed up here on the Gold Coast after a decade or so of travelling around Australia and the world is because of the phase of the development that is the Gold Coast is experiencing. It really is, in my view, on the cusp of greatness, and I think as I roll through the presentation, hopefully you can take that view as well. So just to begin with, the usual disclaimer about information and accuracy. We make no representation of these, but these are about the projects which are going to be occurring on the Gold Coast. If I can just get the next slide up. There we go. So it might be difficult to read that, but I'm just going to draw your attention to just a couple of statistics that are on this page. This is just a 15-year change of the Gold Coast. And one of the interesting things for me is the population growth, not quite doubled in that 15 years between 1996 and 2011, but the economy of the Gold Coast has tripled in that time. So less than double the population, but triple the economy. So growing from 6.4 billion to 19.2 billion in that time. That is because the Gold Coast is evolving from a tourism destination into a more broadly based economy. And that's a really important factor because historically the Gold Coast has had awesome boom-bust cycles. And those of you who are in property would have observed those over time, and you can easily look at the stats and see those stats. You can look at the unemployment rates. We often overshoot on unemployment on the Gold Coast because of that boom-bust arrangement. And we have had, as a council, for more than a decade now, a policy of diversifying the economy. And through that diversification away from tourism-based jobs, which are often the lower paid jobs, if you like, in an economy, around hospitality and retail, into higher growth and higher paying careers. So we're making a tremendous push into the innovation space. We think there's lots of opportunities for that, given the lifestyle. People want to, those innovative and culturally creative people, like to live in a nice location, and we can offer that here. And in attracting those sorts of people, increase the values of the businesses that we have on the Gold Coast. And we've already seen that in that tripling for only a doubling of population. But that aside, in that sort of general sense, let's get on to a couple of specific things. Just after this slide. So this is just an example of where things have moved from in the last 12 months to forward-looking. So the bottom chart there shows only about 20% of people thought that things were going to be better on the Gold Coast than what they had been. Looking forwards, the next 12 months there's 38%, so nearly 40% of people in terms of business confidence thought things were going to be much better or somewhat better. So we have had an uptick in confidence on the Gold Coast, and that becomes relevant when you start to look at what is being done and what is coming in terms of projects. Next slide. Okay. The Commonwealth Games is the obvious one. So if you had $2 billion to spend in a city, you probably wouldn't choose the Commonwealth Games, but the Commonwealth Games is coming to the city. And yes, it is a north of $2 billion expenditure that will result by the Games. So in pre-event terms, we're already seeing that. It's reflected in the business confidence graph earlier. It's going to be a significant employment generator. Probably 30,000 jobs will come from the Games spend itself, about half of which will be capital expenditure, but the other half will be operational expenditure. So think about a $1 billion expenditure just on operational matters within the city and southeast Queensland. So that's on things like security, hospitality, event management, traffic management, those sorts of things, which is all translates once again back into jobs for the local population. There's quite a bit of bring forward of investment in terms of venues for the Games themselves, and there'll also be quite a bit of pre-event events, so sorry for the double, but events that occur prior to the Commonwealth Games as test events of these large venues. So if you want to test a Commonwealth Games venue, you have to have a pretty big event in advance of it, and there'll be large sporting and cultural events which occur across the city in the 16 and 17 years as test events for the Games themselves. Tremendous international exposure. So 1.5 billion views, 1,000 hours of live broadcast. There'll be 3,000 of the world's media here. It's actually a very large event and will be the largest event in Australia over the next decade. There are, in the long lead time of such international events, already all the next decade and a half are booked out, and this one will be the only one held in Australia over the next decade. So it's a significant story regionally. It's important actually to think about what sort of effects there might be from the Games. And it's not just what happens during the Games itself, it's what is left afterwards. So if you think about Brisbane in 1982 and then the World Expo in 88, which once again the Lord Mayor talked about, he talked about how Brisbane was seen as a country town in those World Expo times. And what was left after Expo, in physical terms, was really just a large paddock on the south side of the Brisbane River where someone came along afterwards and built Southbank. But what was left in intangible terms was this idea that Brisbane could be a world city. And the Lord Mayor talked about it being a world city. And that idea came from, and the confidence to have that originally came from the hosting of the Commonwealth Games in 1982 and the World Expo in 1988. The intangible confidence that a city derives from hosting and being successful in hosting games is actually really important because it changes the nature of the population, increases that city pride and city confidence, and changes the way the city develops thereafter. But what was interesting also is some of the policy things that changed. So one of the major changes which occurred after World Expo was footpath dining. This idea that you could actually sit on the outside of a restaurant and dine on the footpath, that wasn't possible before 1988. Those policy changes, which cost little, but achieve a great change at a city, are the sorts of things which come from hosting such a large event, and we expect to see those sorts of things happening on the Gold Coast as well, as the Gold Coast rapidly emerges rather than just incrementally emerges as part of the ongoing change. So Melbourne has been hosted a Games in 2006. It did reinforce its reputation as a events city, but Melbourne has already developed so far in terms of events. It perhaps was only an incremental change, not what you might consider a fundamental change to the nature of the city, which we anticipate for the Gold Coast. And to that end, there's already a legacy committee, a committee which is put together from businessmen and women across the Gold Coast who are already working on what's going to happen in 2019 after the Games. So this is just a map of the Games Village. It was recently announced that Grocon are the developer for the Games Village. What you're seeing there is a 29 hectare site, which will be the core element of a larger precinct, which I'll talk about later. So this Games Village, every Games needs to have a village. They're always held in a central location because of security and transport and all those other logistical reasons. And they are the make or break of every Games. So if you get the village wrong, the Games aren't successful. If you get the village right, then they're almost certainly going to be successful. The village and the development of the village is so important. It was probably the biggest commercial risk for these Games, and I'm pleased to say that we think that risk is now ameliorated as a result of the commercial arrangements which are being put in place for it. It houses 6,500 athletes. So there's a lot of people to go into it. It's a small regional town just being built in that location, ostensibly just for the Games themselves. But to house those, and they really do pack them in everywhere, these athletes, as long as they're very well hydrated, these athletes, so you need to have a maximum of 4 athletes per toilet. But once the athletes have left, the village is reconverted back to a residential development of, in this case, about 1,250 dwellings, of which about 1,170 will be apartments, housed in about 20 buildings between 4 and 8 stories high. So it's actually a low-rise, relatively village-like arrangement of apartments in this location. So 4 to 8 stories and about 80 townhouses, all built around a 7-hectare park and a town centre with its own Woolworths or Coles and other mixed-use community centres. So it's actually a new small suburb being built right there in that location. Alongside it, interestingly enough for the people who aren't here, is a tertiary hospital, so a brand new hospital, which is the Gold Coast University Hospital, just been completed at the cost of around $1.5 billion. And just to the southwest of it is Griffith University. Griffith University's largest campus and rapidly developing campus. And running through the centre of it is the soon-to-be-open Gold Coast Light Rail. So if you think about that investment, which has just gone into that particular location, I can't think of anything quite like it, which is actually developed and will be developed so quickly. So it's got a major light rail transport link. It's got a major Australian university with a large international contingent. It's got a major tertiary teaching hospital alongside it, and it's about to have more than 1,000 units to accommodate those students who will go there, or the people who want to live along the light rail route. So it's actually a very interesting location and something which is worth keeping an eye on in the way that develops. It's reasonably unique, I think, in Australia. It'll be finished by 2017, just in time for the Games in 2018, and construction's probably going to start in early 2015 in that location. Just if I draw your attention to this map here, the village that I was talking about was right in the centre of it. So where the old trotting track was, that's where the village location is. And that outer ring is actually the delineation of what's known as the Gold Coast Health and Knowledge Precinct. So in terms of the legacy of the Games, and in the same way that Southbank started on the paddock that was left behind after Expo, the paddock that's left behind after all the temporary facilities from the Games disappear will be filled by a health and knowledge precinct. So we expect to use the tertiary hospital and the university and the light rail to drive a business and commercialisation precinct of both innovation and health businesses. So this is going to be the legacy, if you like, of the Games. If Southbank was the legacy of Brisbane's Expo, then we are proposing that a health and knowledge precinct will be the legacy of the Com Games. The Comm Games is one because a lot of infrastructure was already in place. A lot of infrastructure was already in place on the Gold Coast, including these 2 stadiums and a range of other pieces of infrastructure. The Lord Mayor also talked about cultural activities. As it turns out, the Gold Coast has learnt from the way that Brisbane has moved and has just finished an international design competition for a cultural precinct. So housed in the centre of the Gold Coast, just about 700 metres back from Surfers Paradise, will be this cultural precinct. About $380 million worth of renovation and new buildings. That tower is an art tower, so it's an art gallery in a vertical form, which is reasonably synonymous with the Gold Coast, if you like. But also a large performing arts and outdoor performance space on that precinct, so about a 17-hectare parcel of land. It's going to be one of the drivers, if you like, for the next phase of tourism growth. We see that cultural tourism is going to be, particularly from Southeast Asia and Eastern Asia, an important element in tourism attraction, and the Gold Coast wants to retain and ensure that it is part of that tourism, inbound tourism growth, by creating not only an attraction which is the beach, but also an attraction which is a deeper cultural tourism element. So this is a map of the site. As you can see, surrounded by water, an incredible location for such a precinct. I wouldn't compare it to the Sydney Opera House, but it has the sorts of things which make cultural precincts successful. That is a spectacular location and has some spectacular architecture that goes with it. And we will be drawing on an emerging creative class which is already here on the Gold Coast. That spiralling helix on the outside of the building is actually a stairway. You can exit the building at any level and go up and down via the stairs rather than use the lift, so you're actually getting that outdoor Gold Coast lifestyle. And if you so desire, you can jump off the end of that attached to a bungee cord. So once again, one of those things about the Gold Coast, some serious elements to it, but also some less serious elements to it, and why not? You've got to have fun along the way. I did mention the light rail. It's due to open in June of this year, 13 kilometres, which runs through the centre of the Gold Coast. It's going to have a transport benefit, no doubt about that. But one of the things which these large pieces of transport infrastructure does, once again, as the Lord Mayor already mentioned, is have a broader impact on the economy. So he talked about that 14% uplift as a result of Airport Link. This is another piece of transport infrastructure which has already shown some signs of benefit along the corridor. And to complement that, there's a light rail corridor development plan. So for the 200 hectares of land, a kilometre either side of the light rail route, there is already development restrictions which are easing. We've got our city plan, which is just in for the first state interest check, which also removes that red tape around development and change of use along the light rail. It will have a catalytic impact. If you look at that picture, the blue buildings in that picture are the ones which are able to be developed or able to be easily redeveloped. So if you look at that picture, there is a tremendous amount of space available for development or redevelopment along that light rail corridor. And also adjacent to that corridor is upgrades of Parklands, which provide that amenity. Now, this is an interesting one. For those of you take note of Gold Coast Affairs, there's a proposal for a thing called a Broadwater Marine project, which is a cruise ship terminal within the Broadwater. This is a picture from Australia Day. You can see how many boats there are out on the water. It's busier than the M1 on Australia Day on the waterways, and it's a much-loved precinct for all Gold Coasters, whether they use it or not. We've seen the passion which comes when we talk about potential redevelopment options within the city. Now, what's interesting about this, whether this project goes ahead or not, and there's probably another 2 years worth of toing and froing before construction might start in this particular project, which contains a potential casino, cruise ship terminal, convention centre, other residential and retail, a tremendous amount of potential development here. What's interesting about this is, irrespective of whether it goes ahead or not, it's actually attracted a lot of international investor interest. And the possible proponent has between $3 and $5 billion worth to invest in this location. So they've made a commitment of between $3 and $5 billion to invest in this particular location. And as I say, whether it goes ahead or not, that's a very interesting point to note, that in the competitive international capital market, there are investors who are prepared to put that sort of money into this particular location, which to me, in my role, is a fantastic vote of confidence of where people see this city heading in the longer term. So as you can see, a few different views there. Quite a well thought out development. It's got to get past, obviously, state and council agreements to get into a construction phase, and it will take between 18 months and 2 years to do that, but it has a tremendous amount of potential. Even if it doesn't, though, we have been very much heartened by the international capital response, investor response to it. A few other small projects going on at the moment, putting in underwater a dive attraction off the seaway, once again trying to build our tourism product. And the Lord Mayor, not the Lord Mayor, only capital cities have the Lord Mayor, our Mayor, Mayor Tom Tate, who's just spent yesterday skydiving with Crown Prince in the Middle East, has declared this year for the Gold Coast the Year of the Crane. And whilst I won't go through them there, you'll see a range of projects that are already approved. We've watched as the architects have become busy, and then the town planners have become busy over the last 12 months, and now the development approvals have been occurring on developments within the city. So there's, once again, a couple of $1 billion worth of already approved developments in the city, and starting to show some more interesting architecture as they come forward. So this is a commercial on the bottom, a residential on the top, mixed-use development going forwards in Southport. Hinds Dam, my staff always get upset. They also worked on Hinds Dam and it's recently completed, and they think that I don't show them enough love by talking about their project, so I told them I'd put that up. Water supply is very important to a city, and that's what they tell me, but it certainly isn't the sort of thing which gets someone's heart racing. But anyway, I've done what I said I'd do and talk about it. So just briefly, those are the sorts of projects which occur and are about to occur on the Gold Coast. Some interesting stuff, and I think it'll be an interesting place, which is why I've stayed here with my family after having the option of staying in many places. Why I've stayed here with my family to be part of the ongoing development of this city. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.